The summer vacation season is upon us, and for many, that involves a lifelong dream trip to Asia. It's also an opportunity for us to step outside our comfort zone and try some of the local delicacies that in some instances may be quite different from home. Seemingly disgusting foods that aren't. It's what's happening in Asia now. Welcome to Asia Now. I'm Steve Miller. It's July, and for many that means school is out and the vacation season has begun. So you're packing your bags and taking a week or longer trip to Asia. The beaches, the nightlife, the food, it's what makes countries like the Philippines, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Indonesia popular destinations. In the West, many of us tend to like our food very neat, very pretty. And when we come across something that doesn't quite fit that mold, many of us tend to immediately disregard it or call it disgusting. The truth is, some of these local delicacies are very tasty. They may not become your favorite dishes, but they also shouldn't be dismissed outright. Now, one of my favorite beverages in the entire world is coffee. And I'm often asked, Steve, what is your favorite coffee? And that's a very difficult answer to come up with. Now, I had once heard about Kopi Luwak, which was made famous by the film The Bucket List with Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman.
You're still drinking that fancy coffee.
What? I'm obsessed.
Read it.
Kopi Luwak is the world's most expensive coffee, though for some it falls under the category of too good to be true. In the Sumatran village where the beans are grown lives a breed of wild tree cat. These cats eat the beans, digest them, and then defecate. The villagers then collect and process the stools. It is the combination of the beans and the gastric juices of the tree cat that give Kopi Luwak its unique flavor and aroma. You're shitting me.
Cats beat me to it.
Commonly referred to as cat poop coffee, it's actually pretty good. Chit Wan, president of the Philippine Coffee Board, explains more.
Well, civet coffee, or Kopi Luwak, or kape musang, and there are variations of how it's called in the Southeast Asian region, is coffee that is ingested by cat-like animals called civets. And these cats are what we call nocturnal eaters. So in the daytime, if you saw them, they would eat probably a banana, but they would eat coffee berries or cherries, as we call the fruit. They only eat them at night. Now, why is that? They use their sense of smell and not their sight to get to these sweet fruits. And actually, in a whole bunch of ripe berries, they will choose the ripest and probably come back the next day to get the next one, or come back after a few days. Or maybe some other civet will find the other fruits as they ripen. I don't think they could remember which tree they went to last night, but generally in a coffee area, there will be many civets, and they would eat the sweetest berries. So what happens after that is what you want to know.
Exactly.
So these fruits are depulped, as how we would pulp it by hand if the humans found it themselves and had to use their sight to check which is red and which wasn't, because they ripen or turn red at different times over, say, 3 or 4 weeks during harvest season. Some, in just one bunch of coffees, there would be some red, and the others would ripen over the next 3 weeks. So people, if you had to let them do it, would have to go back to the trees so many times. And in some production areas, that would be very, very time-consuming. So the civets, they do it as a matter of course because they eat the berries. They love berries. They eat blueberries, and they think the coffee is a berry as well because it's got some pulp. and it's ingested. And what happens in the system of the civet is what humans would like to do outside the civet as what you call fermentation. So the beans ferment inside the stomach of the civet, and when it's passed out, it is already depulped, but it's still covered with parchment. And parchment is a very tough, natural covering.
So what happens after? Oh, so you collect the beans that are covered in the parchment. And what happens next?
And
how is it cleaned?
Out, of course, in the shape of the digestive system. So they are passed out, clumped together, and they do come out, of course, with the feces or the excreta of the civet. But one thing nice about the civets is that they're like cats. They would look for their litter, if you will. They will look for the same spot to do it in.
Oh, that makes it very handy in terms of being able to collect the beans in the excrement.
That's correct. So after the farmers find this, and the civets are omnivores. They will probably eat some chickens, but they will not really eat like cows or pigs. Maybe they'll eat birds, and then they will eat berries the rest of the time. So you wash the waste or the poop. Let's call it the poop. You wash it and intensely in water and running water, and then you come out with parchment. The parchment does not yet become the roasted coffee. The parchment is then further dried and then hulled. When you say hulled, you remove the parchment to expose the green bean. And then the green bean, of course, will need to be roasted. But even the green beans will not have any off smell, any off odors, because they've been washed thoroughly. And then the next process after hulling the parchment would be exposing the green beans and then going into roasting. At roasting, you expose them to like 350 degrees to 400 degrees Fahrenheit of heat. So I guess if there is any iota of bacteria on it, that would die in the roasting process.
Another delicacy enjoyed by many travelers to Vietnam, but probably not Indiana Jones, is Cobra. Tor Ostrom, a vice president at Habitat for Humanity in the Portland area, recounts his experience.
Well, it's something I'd heard about and wanted to try. So we were doing a kind of multi-country trip, and we're in Hanoi. And I didn't think it was going to work for our schedule. And my wife, Becky, was not very thrilled with the idea, but we had some time come up free. So the house that we were staying at, I got talking to the guy that owned it, and he introduced me to a cab driver. And the cab driver was really excited. So he drove us out, I think it's called Lamont, which is kind of within Hanoi. And you kind of go back through a pretty sketchy-looking area, and you kind of pulled up to a gap in the fence, and you could see all these kind of bamboo structures that were built up over a pond. And there were barking dogs and squealing pigs. It was kind of the place that you would expect to serve Cobra Heart. So we got out of the cab, and the cab driver acted as our interpreter and took us in, and we kind of chatted with the people that were working in the kitchen area. And there were no other customers there, so I don't think we were imposing. But they didn't have the snakes on site, so we walked up the alley to another area, and they pulled out some sacks out of one of those ceramic kind of containers you see them pull snakes out of on TV, and trotted out 3 different cobras that they had slithering around the ground in front of us, which was a little nerve-wracking, but I figured they knew what they were doing, and they hadn't got my money yet, so they probably didn't want me dead. So got to pick out which cobra I wanted, and then they hold it back down to the restaurant. They take you out and walk over the kind of floating deck area, and it's not it's clean, but it's not super clean. It's outdoors, open air kind of deal. And they brought out some guy with a rusty knife who proceeded to unceremoniously kind of whack this cobra in front of us and start pouring its blood out and kind of squeezing all these sorts of liquids out of it. for prying its heart out, which they dump into a glass and they fill up partway with kind of a rice liquor. And then they fill up 2 other shot glasses with blood, heart still slowly palpitating, which is kind of gross, but I guess also some of the appeal of trying something different. So,
at that point, were you thinking, what have you gotten yourself into?
I think that I was okay with it. The fact that he just kind of used a rusty knife to kill it on the dirty floor didn't lead me to believe it was the most terrible, sterile of conditions, but Becky looked pretty horrified when they tried to get her to drink blood and wash all sorts. But it was kind of what I'd signed up for, so I was still excited. I tried the heart, and I let it sit in my mouth for a minute so you could feel it beat once or twice, and then you just kind of swallow it. The blood is pretty metallic, as you would expect, kind of irony, but the bile was absolutely filthy disgusting, and the color of like a rock star energy drink. It was pretty putrid. I don't understand why people like that so much, but a lot of cultures value it. So that was kind of the big show that we tried, but then they promised this big deal of they're going to prepare the Cobra 9 ways and bring it out kind of in courses. And so they take it back up to the kitchen and cuddle up and do all that stuff and start bringing it out in courses. And there was, a couple people that had kind of come to watch in the kitchen, including this little kid who just kind of kept on cracking up and staring back and forth between Becky and I. Because as it turns out, after the fact, I found out it's supposed to be an aphrodisiac. So I think he thought that was pretty funny. So they did bring out a number of different dishes. It probably was a total of 9, all of which were fried. But they were all pretty tasty. I thought they did a good job of cooking it. I've tried snake before in China and had it be really tough and overly seasoned. But this was pretty good. They did kind of like little spring roll things and chopped it and fried it. Tried it with a bunch of different sauces. And the decor of the restaurant is exactly as you'd expect. Even though it was outdoors, there was big jars of preserved cobras and all sorts of crazy stuff. But yeah, with the pigs squealing in the background and dogs barking and people with rusty knives watching you eat, it was a little disconcerting.
And finally, one last item from Cambodia, and this is a personal experience. My wife and I traveled to Siem Reap last January, and some of our followers asked me to go and try to find a very unique street food. Now, if you're afraid of spiders, this may not be the story for you, but I'm going to go ahead and tell it anyway. They asked me to try fried tarantula. So, at the end of Pub Street in Siem Reap, there was actually a street cart there with a mountain of fried tarantula, as well as other bugs that you could actually purchase and try to eat. So, I'm a man of my word. I plopped down my $1 bill and picked up what I thought was a good-sized tarantula. I was really amazed at the texture because I thought it would be soft. I thought it would be hairy, but it wasn't. It was truly fried. It was almost barbecued to a crispy texture. And in fact, that is the overwhelming sensation that I have and that still lingers with me. The texture was of a very crispy, burnt nature. But it didn't taste that way, nor did I think it was disgusting. When I actually did bite into this fist-sized spider, it was crunchy. I mean, it was really crunchy. And the one thing that I can only come up with that this texture is analogous to is if you take a piece of bacon, fry it up in a pan, and overcook it. You start to get that charcoal, crispy texture, how all the limberness of the bacon goes away. It becomes this rock-solid piece of delicious meat in your skillet. And while I wouldn't call the fried tarantula absolutely delicious, I would say that's very analogous to a piece of bacon. You see, those that prepared this tarantula actually did barbecue it, and there was a hint of barbecue flavor on the tarantula. So as I bit into the legs, they instantaneously snapped off. They were crunchy. There was no hair to get in my teeth because they had all been seared off by the barbecue. It was crunchy, and I have to say, it was actually fairly good. I made my way through the legs into the head and abdomen, and it wasn't really until I got to the larger portion of the spider that it started to get maybe a little gooey, the meaty substance of the spider. But even that wasn't bad. It tasted more as if you were trying to eat, say, some kind of blood sausage. Overall, it wasn't too bad, and I have to say, it is something that I would try again. So there you have it. Those are some of the exotic foods that many people think are disgusting in Asia, but aren't. Before I go, I would love to hear from you. What exotic foods have you tried? Were they great or utterly disgusting? Be sure to share your experiences in the comments on Facebook or Twitter. You can find us at facebook.com/AsiaNewsWeekly or follow @AsiaNewsWeekly on Twitter. If you have an interesting topic of something taking place in Asia or have feedback for the show, please send an email to podcast@AsiaNewsWeekly.net. Coming up on Friday is a digest of the week's big stories on Asia News Weekly. Thank you very much for listening today. For Asia Now, I'm Steve Miller. Asia Now is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.